Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Check out great deals throughout the store at Safeway. This week at Safeway, get mega packs of USDA Choice boneless beef chuck roast for $3.97 per pound with digital coupon, limit 2 packages. Plus, Hass avocados are 10 for $10 member price. And get Fuji apples for just 77 cents per pound with digital coupon. Also this week at Safeway, get selected varieties of Lucerne milk gallons for the member price of $3.99 each when you buy 2. Visit Safeway.com or head into your local store for more deals.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
Hey y'all, it's me, Elena Grace, and you're listening to another episode of I've Been Thinking. So we have a special guest today. Mr. Chris Johnson from Passion Pod is joining us to discuss what he has learned as the host of a podcast dedicated to all things driven by passion. Chris, say hi.
Hello, my name is Johnson. I own a skateboard shop in Eau Claire, Wisconsin that I opened 6.5 years ago called Passion Board Shop. And over time, I kind of got pigeonholed into only doing that. And as I got a little bit older, I had this idea for a show. So I started my own podcast called Passion Pod, and you can find it on Spotify or anywhere else. If you just search Passion Pod, the little logo is like this little skull guy. You'll be able to find it. But I wanted to do something that wasn't skateboarding related, even though the reason I opened my shop and the reason I have it is because I'm really passionate about skateboarding. I kind of had this idea that everybody has a similar story. You know, they don't have to be about skateboarding, but we're all kind of similar people. So I had this idea, did a whole season with a bunch of different business owners and creative friends of mine in my own city. And it did really well. Everyone really liked it, and it was really fun. And I've been working on that project kind of ever since.
I love that. That's a really awesome story. Y'all, we really wanted to do this episode for y'all as a little New Year's inspiration. And because we want to kick off, I really think this is important to kick off your new year with positive vibes, right? And so stories of people following their passion and learning about themselves and all of that stuff. I just think that 2020 has been a year of awakening for a lot of us, and a lot of people have been forced to pivot and rethink what they're doing with their lives and who they are and all that stuff. And it's been a year of really hard but really awesome growth for a lot of people. And I think that a lot of people moving forward will maybe take those opportunities to follow their passions like you have, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely the quarantine kind of put people into a position where they had to look within themselves simply because they had all these hours to do so.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to recognize the money and the trajectory of where you're at. A lot of people feel like they're taking some kind of weird step back or something, try to walk away from their career path. But that's not really the case, and it's not necessarily a pivot in a different direction. It is still moving forward, right? It's forward in your natural progression of your own life, hopefully. Because again, the whole point, and that's what America's about, right? Is pursuing the pursuit of happiness.
Yes.
We kind of lost that. We've kind of all of a sudden became the pursuit of status and money. But really, when it comes down to it, the only reason you're chasing those things is because you think it's going to make you happy. But it's not gonna. And as you kind of grow through that path, a lot of people hit this kind of like little wall, and they realize, especially during this quarantine, they've like reflected and they've realized that, hey, I worked really hard to get up to this position or to work for this company or to be, own this house or whatever. And they realize like that's not really what they're happy, like makes them happy anyways. What's making them happy is spending all this time with their friends and family sitting in their house.
Yeah. Why that really that is really good. Like I am all about finding joy. And so I have to wonder, like all of that makes me wonder, from what you've learned talking to people, why do you think that so many people don't chase their passions sooner? Like, why do you think it takes something like this for us to realize, oh shit, I need to be happy?
Honestly, like this is kind of a strange analogy, but I was talking to a good friend of mine the other day. He came into my store and he was like kind of uncomfortable and all embarrassed. And he admitted to me his sexuality. He came out to me. And the reason that this is important, or why this is relevant, is because people like portray what they think they need to based on the people around them. Their friends and their family want them to be successful, so they want to see them and they congratulate them when they get their raise or they get their promotion or they get whatever. And it's the opposite thing when all of a sudden you tell them that's not what you want to do. You know what I mean? It's the same way people are afraid to come out about their sexuality or something like that.
Right.
That's their true self, is because they're afraid of all this judgment. And when I like walked away, the last job that I had, and I was assistant manager for Verizon, so it's not like I made a ton of money, but certainly plenty. And I was pretty young. And when I told my parents, like, look, I really don't feel like myself when I'm at this job. I've been wearing a suit and tie for years now, and I really feel uncomfortable with it. I have to change my vocabulary, my mannerisms. The people I'm spending time with at work, these aren't my kind of people. And I feel like I'm contributing negatively to the world, honestly, even though I have a really comfortable, easy job that makes money. And the problem is that I was getting praised to try to pursue that kind of a career. And I think that's what it is most people get praised by the world around them because that's what they think is success. And when all of a sudden you have this idea to pursue something you're passionate about, people think that should just be your hobby. Like it's not a real thing for some reason. And because of that, I think people are afraid of the judgment that gets put on it. And I think that's the biggest part. And when that switch kind of happens, when that judgment no longer matters, unfortunately for a lot of people I've talked to, it's because they get to a really deep, dark place within their own mental health. They get to a spot where they're so incredibly unhappy and dissatisfied with what they're doing that they know that a change just kind of has to happen. And that's when all of a sudden that reflection time comes in and they realize money and success in the form that it was before really didn't make them happy. And if they're this miserable doing it, some kind of change needs to happen. They're willing to sacrifice, the status, the money, the comforts of their insurance or whatever else to do something they think will make them happy.
Yeah. So in your experience, people who decide like to chase their passions, is it usually some traumatic experience or like some breaking point when they're like, I need to prioritize myself? Or are there more people than we think of who are just like, I need to make this change for me because this isn't the path I need to be on?
I think it's a mixture, but yeah, there is like always a switch that happens because it's not even like, at first, I guess a lot of people think it's when you're working for like a corporate job or something and you totally change industries like I did. But, I've talked to like photographers and stuff too, and people take like what is, quote unquote, the easy path to try to make money in whatever that career is. So I know a lot of people in that industry that just like do wedding photos and stuff, which is totally fine. But they didn't get into photography to do wedding photos, right? So it's not that they're incredibly unhappy necessarily doing wedding photos, but they still find that same thing that I was talking about before, where over time they're sitting there and they're editing these photos at night and they're like, well, this isn't making me happy. Why is photography not making me happy? Like there's a problem here that needs to be solved. And yeah, I think, like I said, it's a little bit of both. For me, when I opened my store and chose to do that, there was some traumatic stuff. My parents split up. My dad ended up having a heart transplant, and it was kind of a nasty time. And that was kind of my trigger to realize, like, my morality and realize I don't have unlimited time. And if I'm only planning to set up for the best possible retirement, that might not exist anyways.
Right.
So for me, there was that switch, but I don't think it's always that. It does come down to, though, people choose to do this because they're in a position that they're no longer feeling fulfilled or happy, whatever it is that they were doing.
Yeah, like you said with the photographers who do wedding photos, or like me, I am an artist. That's like something that I love to do. But when I start taking commissions, that takes all the fun out of painting, right? And it's like it takes the passion out of your passion, you know?
And I don't think that like people necessarily have to do it for a career specifically for that reason, because I've known other people that do that too. And I feel that I do a lot of painting and stuff myself. I do like graphics, I'll draw on my iPad Pro and I'll do apparel and stuff for people. But I also do like acrylic paintings and stuff. But I found the same thing. If somebody reaches out and they're like, "Hey, for this person's birthday or whatever, we like your art. Just paint me whatever, and I'll buy it." Then I'm like stoked about it. But
yes.
I have this like weird block, even if it's within my style. I have this weird block if somebody's like, "Hey, I'd really like to see this." Like recently, I finally got to work on it, but a friend of mine wants me to make like, for people listening, I paint like stupid little creatures. Like, I don't really know how else to describe it. Basically, I was going through a tough time in my life. My marriage was falling apart and stuff, and I was really miserable in my own home. And I found that painting was like a great outlet for me. So I would sit for hours just paint like dumb little creatures that are like kind of cute and make me kind of laugh. I don't know.
Yeah.
Make those. Well, anyway, so yeah, a friend of mine wanted me to do a logo. So he asked me to make like a scorpion looking creature of mine. Well, even just the simple fact of like, now I have to do it, buddy, and it has to be this thing. Like, I've been putting it off for months. I'm finally working on it right now. But that's what's kind of cool is like with this whole like pursuing passions thing. As long as your job isn't making you entirely miserable, I'm not telling everyone that they can't do that job.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean, you can definitely pursue your passion on the side. It's just more about, like with my whole show, it's more about inspiring people to realize that, like, if you incorporate your passions more into your life at whatever scale, you will feel more fulfilled. And I think that will have a snowballing effect after you do it a little bit more and you start taking your passions more seriously, doing them more on the side on the weekends or whatever it is. You're probably going to end up wanting to do something in that industry anyways, like for a career. That tends to happen. But I completely feel you there, because that happens with like a lot of people. And that's like I said, with the wedding photography and stuff too, it's that same thing. Like, even if you enjoy the medium, like if the reason that you're doing is taken away, then all of a sudden the fun kind of gets lost a bit.
Yeah, it's like when you take the art out of it, like I guess the inspiration and the creativity out of it, that's where it becomes less fun. You're doing it just because you know you have to do it.
Right.
So I guess that kind of brings me to another question that I have for you in a kind of roundabout way. Why do you think that, and this might be like a dumb question in a way, but why do you think that society doesn't praise us for following our passions? Like, because like in a way it does, right? People are like, "Oh wow, you're an artist, that's so amazing," or "You're a professional photographer," whatever it is. They're like, "Wow, that's so cool, podcaster," whatever. But when you're on the like when you're learning that, when you're becoming that, they'll kind of be like, "Oh, you're a photographer, that's cute," or "Oh, you're a podcaster, really?" You know what I'm saying? So why? I don't know. I just don't get it. Like, it's like once you get to the top, then they're like, "Oh, that's really cool." But while you're becoming, it's just not encouraged.
I think it's the like keeping up with the Joneses mentality within our country, and people have this thing. It's the same question that when people ask you, they meet you and they go, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" Right? And you say, "I'm a branch manager for this bank," or "I sell, vehicles at Ford," or whatever it is. People like to be able to compare themselves. That's how it works. So when people ask you what it is that you're doing, if it's something that they don't have a great perspective on, then it's hard for them to respect it, because they can't tell whether or not they're beating you or not. which is like, it sucks, but I really think that's how people view it. And when it's something like a podcast or like skateboarding as you get older, you know, for me, or art or whatever, if you're not making money on it, then they don't really have a good perspective of why or what the trajectory is. I think once you're in like that point where you make a good living, which is why they like, you know, respect celebrities and all that, then they just know that that person is more successful for them. So then they're going to praise them. But I think it's this like huge gray area where there's just like not a whole lot of understanding, because the reason I say that is if you talk to anybody that has any experience in whatever that thing is you're talking about, like podcasts or art or anything else, regardless of how good you are, you'll see how quickly those people are excited to talk to you and how quickly they are to encourage you to do better and provide you resources and all that.
Yeah.
It's just because they have that understanding of like where you're coming from and why. I really think that's the biggest difference there.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'd never thought about it like that. I guess I always have thought about it from the perspective of like, we're just expected to fit into these little squares because our parents or whoever knows that it's going to be successful, right? Like they want you to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or whatever it is. And when you don't fit into that little box, then they're like, oh, I don't get it anymore. And then so society has kind of created that mindset just in general for everybody. But it makes a lot of sense that there is that competitive aspect to it.
Right. I mean, think of it like with other things that are common and people do that don't make money, right? Compare it to like golf or something. Wealthy people, if you talk to them about how you golf on the weekends, they're not going to question that at all. And it's because a lot of those people do golf, so they just have this like understanding already of why you would do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. That's really interesting. Do you think that, well, I don't know. Do you talk to people who have worked outside of the United States a lot? Or
No, not really, not as of yet, because I haven't been able to travel so much.
Right.
Yeah, I do travel a lot, and I have in the past years traveled a lot outside of the country.
right.
But not so much to talk specifically about this kind of thing. And it really, that is like such a large question because each country is so different. And
Exactly.
up. So the idea of doing something that you care about for a living, like that's not something people do in most countries because they don't really have like the freedom, not just like within the country, but within their own like culture to try to do something like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on where I was going. That's exactly what I was wondering, is if this is a uniquely American phenomenon, which I highly doubt. I feel like it is a widespread phenomenon where you're expected to make the money and be able to provide rather than fulfilling yourself.
Yeah, I mean, again, it comes down to each individual like culture, right? So
Right.
I took 4.5 years of Japanese growing up. I've always been a little bit of a nerd that way. And the country that I traveled to, outside of the U.S. was Japan, and this was like 5 years ago or something like that. And it's so beautiful over there. There's
Yes, it is.
much diversity within the geography, within every city's totally different. It's an awesome country, but there isn't individualism there because it's looked down upon there.
Yeah.
And it's strange that like here, you're not really respected so much for like what company you work for. It's more about what position within the company, again, because people then can kind of compare like where you would be. They can imagine how much money maybe you make. But over there, it's like such a status just to work for individual companies. Like that's extremely important to people over there, which is kind of silly in my mind. Again, I'm coming from somewhere different, but
Right.
the whole idea of working for a different company, right, is that you're serving their dream. That's ultimately all it is you're serving somebody else's dream. You're helping them achieve that dream. And if you're working for this huge corporation with 100,000 employees, 100,000 people now aren't pursuing their own. They're doing it for one person. And how selfish is that? That's horrible, in my opinion. Versus like in Japan, that's something to be praised. Which I guess, okay, I mean, if your job is providing you the tools that you need to live your life the way you want elsewhere, that's great. But I just think it's really, really sad that that many people are trying to help just one person when really that one person isn't even doing what they want anyways, because the people at the top of these companies, they're publicly traded. So it's exclusively about profit at that point. How sad is that to look at like this much of the population is working towards something that none of them even care about?
Yeah, that is really poignant. That's something that I've thought about a lot. Like, and I find myself going into these like nihilistic spirals where I'm like, does anything really matter? Like, does it matter if you're a doctor? Does it matter if you're, but just all of that. But I think that what I've ultimately come to is that happiness is what's important, right? And if you need to provide for your family and like that is what you have to do and you can find fulfillment in that, then work that job that like maybe seems like it doesn't have a universal effect, right? But for me, it feels really futile in a way to work a job that doesn't provide me fulfillment because I can't get by on feeding somebody else's dream. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, you can't take care of others unless you're taking care of yourself.
Yes.
Working for something that you don't believe in, like, that's the vast majority of your waking hours. If you're doing that, it's going to be really defeating at the end of the day. And that's why you see people come home from work and they're so stressed out, they don't want to play with their kids. They just want to grab fast food and have a beer or whatever because they're so stressed, they like don't even want to deal with it. And if the only reason you're working that job is to provide for your family, but you're bringing in the money, but you emotionally can't provide for your family, then
yes.
problem.
Oh yeah.
You have a much bigger problem to address. And then maybe it's time to like look inward and say, well, even if I can't work exactly what my dream passion thing is, how can I at least get closer to that?
Yeah. I love that. So I guess just about life in general. Obviously, you put a lot of importance in pursuing what makes you happy in whatever form it is, whether it's as your main career path, whether it's as your side hustle to fulfill you, like if you get fulfillment from that. What has your podcast, like talking to all these different people, what have you learned about pursuing what makes you happy?
I guess what I've learned is like how incredibly similar we all are.
Yeah.
It's strange that, and I think a lot of people feel this, whatever it is like your passion is. When I was growing up, skateboarding was like the main thing that I did. There's this kind of like camaraderie within skateboarders that, anywhere you go, you see somebody skating and then it's like, oh, we're all like best friends. And I thought this was like this really cool thing about skateboarding in particular. And like, that's not really the case. That's kind of the same among anything that you're into. I mean, shit, people that play D&D all the time on the weekend get together and they're like stoked,
Yeah, you're right.
They're excited about something and they share that excitement. Well, that's like kind of anything that you're passionate about. If you can like tap in and talk to somebody about something they're passionate about, dude, you could talk for a long time and you guys are going to be best friends. It's been really cool doing that because it kind of just like broadened my mind a little bit of like, look, I don't have to be pigeonholed into believing that because skateboarding was my main passion growing up for a long time. There's no reason that has to stay that way. And as time goes by, we grow and evolve as people, and things change. Our perspectives change, our priorities change, and it kind of broadened my mind to saying, like, look, that's totally okay for me to let go of who I was in the past. And if there's something that piques my interest, there's no reason why I can't go towards that. I don't have to believe that just because I've owned the skateboard shop and I have the show, that's exclusively what I need to spend my time doing.
Right.
When something comes up, I can say yes to a new experience, and maybe I'll discover something totally new that I'm passionate about.
Yeah. You're so right. I've absolutely experienced that in my life, whether it's like, talking about things that you're passionate about. I can talk for so long about like research that I've done. One of the things I'm really passionate about for whatever reason is understanding terrorism and like the human, like the anthropology and the politics of people who commit acts of terrorism, right? And that is such a niche interest. Like, that is such a weird thing, but I can talk for so long about that. And I have scared many people off with that conversation. But, like, in college, for example, that was my thing. Like, if terrorism got brought up, I was a political science major. if that got brought up in a conversation, people were like, where's Elena? She's going to come running, right? But then I also had to realize in grad school that that wasn't the only thing that I could do. You know, I could do other things too. It's really easy to find something you're passionate about and focus on that so tightly, I guess, that you miss the other things that you could be passionate about too.
Right. But think about like how friendships and stuff happen, how relationships happen. Usually they're out of convenience, right? They're like your coworkers or your neighbors or whatever. They're like people immediately around you, but they don't share anything with you outside of that proximity. When all of a sudden you're talking to people about things that they're passionate about rather than their job, if you straight up like start a conversation with somebody instead of asking them, hey, what do you do for a living? If you just ask them, hey, what are you passionate about? I'm interested. You're going to develop such a close relationship with these people. And that's what's cool about when you work for yourself or in general you're pursuing a passion, because you're surrounding yourself with people that feel that same energy, that same kind of juice. Natural like friendships are going to be like so much stronger because of that, and you're going to tend to be way more successful because you're like the people you're surrounding yourself with, the people you're working with, everybody cares on such a deeper level, and it's not about how much money, it's just about how can we grow this thing as big as possible, which you know, if you're doing things right and you're good at it and you're passionate about it and you put the time and energy in, money's going to be a secondary effect. Like that's just going to come anyways without really trying, honestly. But that's kind of the cool thing when, you know, with the show of talking to all these other people that are really passionate about these things, they can tell I'm genuinely interested in trying to help them in any kind of way. And I'm loving every single conversation that I have. I'm making all these cool friends, and I've been able to have all these really cool opportunities, you know?
Yeah.
I had somebody that makes candles on my show, and for promo stuff, just because I was interested, she let me design my own scent. And
Oh, that's awesome.
I had my own model of candles with my logo and everything. Like,
Wow.
with a coffee, and I've done that with a bunch of random stuff.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, being around people who are like-minded, you know, in the best ways, I think is really inspirational and motivational and helps you keep up the momentum.
That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Everything's a momentum game when it comes to like your mental health. Either you go on a downward cycle that's impossible to get out of, it feels, but the opposite is true too. If you start your day with positive mental attitude, and if you surround yourself with positive people, that positive, uplifting, productive cycle, like that happens too. It just whirlwinds out of control where everything seems to be going in the right direction. And that's why it's so important to like try to start your day off right. Try to take that 5 minutes or whatever you need at the beginning of your day to deep breathe, reflect, and realize, what do I want to get out of today? And then make a plan for it, and then start like going for it right away. You know what I mean? Because that's
for sure.
Go nuts in the best possible way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's also really important what you said about like not saying, hey, you know, what do you do for a living? My boyfriend Adam drives him crazy when people say, what do you do? Or how is work first thing? Because he says, I'm more than just my job, you know? And I think that putting people into these boxes of what their job is or whatever, that is really detrimental to us and to our growth and to us finding our happiness or our passion or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, honestly, when somebody asks you, what do you do for a living when you meet them, it immediately throws up this weird little like tunnel vision of this is just a comparison conversation.
Yes.
It no longer feels like they're interested in you. They're interested in what your accomplishments are professionally. And that's like really, really unfortunate because you probably don't really care what they're right? Like if you want to be friends with them, it's kind of irrelevant what they do for a living anyway.
Yeah.
So, but it's just like a weird standard that we're used to, and hopefully, you know, more and more people can get away with that, or you know, get away from that over time. But right now, like I agree, when people ask me that, at least for me, it's kind of nice because I'm like, hey, I'm doing this thing that I really love, and I can talk about, you know, that, and I don't even bring up the money stuff or
that's so true.
Whatever, you know what I mean? I can bring up all this fun stuff that I've been doing, like the thing or whatever. You know, but I want people to have that same experience. So I'm one of those people that like, I started working for myself so young. I opened my store when I was 23, and I'm such a firm believer that there's a million ways to make money. Like there's so many ways you can make money.
Oh yeah.
That I'm like, there is a way. If you're open to working hard and researching and like being open-minded, whatever it is that you're really into, there is a way to make money to be at least in that industry. And I really think most people would feel so much more satisfied going to work if they try to pursue something like that.
I absolutely 100 million percent agree with you. I mean, that's why I am where I am right now. Rather than killing myself to get into an industry that honestly, I was getting the vibe that the universe didn't even want me there. You know, I had gone to grad school and all this stuff, and I was really excited about it. And then I was like, is this where I'm supposed to be? And I've had that so many times in my life, and I think it's a personal growth thing as well. But, you know, like I said, that's how I ended up here. And I'm doing something that's a lot of fun and fulfills me and hopefully gives other people inspiration and motivation and fulfillment too.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that, like, I don't know what the stat is. I could be messing it up here, but I'm probably pretty close. It's important to realize that most people in America completely change the industries of their career approximately 8 times. Okay, so and that's not just like working for a different company. That's changing the entire direction of their career. And I had this weird time where when I quit my job, I remember my parents saying, like, look, why would you walk away from something that's so guaranteed, easy money, so stable, so whatever, to do this business that might not make you any money and there's like no guarantees in? Well, a few years later, my best friend, he still works for Verizon at the time. He still works in that industry. He was working for Verizon. He had just gotten promoted to be an assistant manager at a different store, like 3 weeks prior or something. So he was the best salesperson, got promoted to be the assistant manager at the store. It was one of the bigger stores in Wisconsin where I live. And out of nowhere, he gets a phone call from his boss, and company-wide, they decided all A-volume stores, because his store is considered A-volume, all A-volume stores were dropping from 4 assistant managers to 3. They just wanted to make that cut. It wasn't important. So even though he was the best salesperson for his store, just got promoted over the phone, his job was just gone. And he was making 70-some thousand a year. He was stable. This is in the same 6-month time frame of his he was still married at this time, but of his wife deciding she wanted a divorce and kicked him out. And out of nowhere, all of a sudden, from living in this nice house with 2 dogs with his wife, he's living in his parents' basement, no job, nothing. And that was not even in his control. So it's this weird facade that people think, if I stay with this is the safe way. But realistically, you're not in any control of it whatsoever. Somebody else has full control over your career.
Yeah.
It's a scary thought. So if you're thinking that the reason that I need to stay with this is the stability, that's the wrong mentality. It's not in your control. If you work for yourself, your job's much more stable because it's 100% in your court. You can take care of whatever you need to take care of.
That is so true, dude. That is really, wow. That I guess I hadn't even thought about it in those terms of working for yourself. It's entirely your ball, you know?
Absolutely.
Wow. I love that. All right. So I guess it's about time for us to wrap up. We've talked about some really good stuff. I really loved this.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. I always appreciate any opportunity to talk about things that I really care about, and especially to new people, you know, because it's not about like talking to me, but it's about starting that conversation. You know what I mean? Hopefully, like, people listening to this then go and talk to their friends or their family, and hopefully they gain some kind of perspective from you or me, and it starts some kind of conversation that helps them with their life.
Oh, I really hope so. So are there any resources that you would suggest to our listeners for, like, books, podcasts, anything that maybe could help them kickstart in that direction?
Oh my God, there's so much. I was just talking to a professional snowboarder that'll be on this next season of my show because he went from being just a pro snowboarder for somebody else and then decided he wanted to own his own company, which is kind of crazy. Like, if you think about how intense it is to make a snowboard and pull company then from it, the apparel and everything, and then have it shipped internationally, get in stores. It's like kind of crazy for somebody to do who doesn't like hardly graduated high school.
Oh, for sure. That stuff blows my mind.
Yeah, but the crazy part is if you just assume you can do it, every resource you need is actually there, right?
Yeah.
So, like, when I wanted to open my store, I just Googled how to open a business. And funnily enough, there's this place in Eau Claire, which is the city I live in, that it was called the Small Business Development Center. And it was by the university. And there was, a guy who worked at the university or whatever, a professor, who you could go for free and they would give you meetings for free with this professor, and you could give a business plan. He would talk you through all the steps that you would need, whatever it is that you would need. You'd give your business plan to his kids in his college class, and they would kind of review things and help you. It's so funny that if you just reach out for help publicly, if you can like swallow your pride and just put it, even if you just like blast it over your social media, hey, I have this idea, I don't even know where to start. Is anybody out there willing to talk to me and give me some pointers on things? You'd be surprised how quickly people are there to help. But the internet in general as a tool. So I would say if you want to do something like that, be open about it. In the same way people that want to lose weight, they post they're starting their weight loss journey. You'll see how much support you get. Post what you're trying to do. Google is an incredible machine. It's pretty insane how much stuff is just available. Every book that you could imagine that you would have had to pay to like buy and read and take a course on in college, all those things are just available on the internet. You can just use them. So I would say Google stuff. You can look at YouTube and try to like listen to people, obviously looking at like podcasts and stuff in the industry you're talking about. Like that's helpful. Another thing that I did when I was opening my skateboard shop is I simply just called other skateboard shops that weren't in a competing area, asked to talk to the owner, and they were surprisingly helpful and willing to talk to me about it and encouraging to say, hey, this is what I had to do when I opened my thing. So I would say do that type of thing. And then the other things are just taking care of like yourself, because if your mental health isn't there, if you're not feeling that juice, then like that's kind of the biggest obstacle, is people getting in their own way. It's not that the information or resources aren't available. It's that they aren't giving it 100% because of, X, Y, or Z.
Right.
So I would say if you can in America, I know that's really tough because healthcare doesn't like our healthcare industry doesn't care about your mental health. Yeah. By how many corporate jobs anyways, like their insurances will cover usually up to like 8 sessions with a therapist. I really suggest, I think I go to therapy every 2 weeks or so. I think the world would be a very, very much better place if everyone could go to see a therapist once a month. And
Yeah.
you don't have any problems in your mind, just for the simple sake of being able to talk through things and reflect, it will help you like hone in on what you're trying to do so much. If you can't afford to go see a therapist, look up mindful meditation. I think meditation is an extremely useful tool that doesn't have to cost you anything. It can help you get focused and knowing 100% what you're trying to do, and you can put your plan together. And then one other random one is just a book that I want to share. And I think reading is like something, unfortunately, I don't know if it's because of the internet that we all just read on our phones, but books are incredible tools. And I went through this time frame where I was reading a lot of self-help books for a little while. I was kind of just like going to the library and picking one off the shelf, and I'd read it. A week later, I'd read a different one. And I came across this one. It's called Wake Up, and it's by an author named Chris Perez Brown. And the whole like book, it's kind of funny. The description says 54 playful strategies to help you snap out of autopilot. And basically it's like a mindfulness kind of book. So the book has different segments, so 54 of them, where it's 3 pages long. And the first page describes a practice that you can try for a predetermined amount of time. The second page describes why they think that's going to help you. The third page is self-reflection after you've done it. So examples would be, one of them said, every day, make sure that you sit down somewhere, stop everything you're doing, and listen to a song of your choice, uninterrupted. Don't do anything else. Close your eyes and just listen to a song of your choice while you're breathing for however long that takes, your 3 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
Do that every single day and see how that affects your life. And it's kind of crazy how many of these little things ended up being really helpful to me. And each one, may or may not help you. But there were a lot of practices in this book that, for me, they just really helped me kind of like settle down and focus. And the biggest one for me was, one of them said you needed to go 1 week without screens outside of work use. So no, like watching YouTube, no video games, no movies, no TV or whatever. You can only use it specifically when you need to do work things, but otherwise turn your screen off. And I ended up going like 6 or 7 weeks with it's like any screen time at all. And that's really when I got into podcasts, because I'm like, wow, I can get all this stuff done. I'm in this great mood because I'm listening to this positive, uplifting conversations while I'm getting stuff done around my house. It was kind of crazy. It really helped with my positive mental attitude. So I really suggest people go check that book out. Again, it's called Wake Up by Chris Perez Brown. I think it's a really quick read. I think if you just try some of those things, you might find something that really helps you.
Wow. Yeah, those are really awesome suggestions, especially that book. I'm going to have to go check that out. And I'll definitely put it in the blog post about this episode. I'll put like a link to that book there for anybody who wants it.
Yeah, and of course, natural plug for myself. I encourage you to go load. There's no reason that you need to listen to them in any specific order. It sounds interesting to you, whether it's a candle maker or whether it's a tattoo artist or a photographer or an athlete or whatever. Find somebody that the industry seems interesting. Give it a listen. You'll probably enjoy it.
Awesome. And tell us your Instagram, and once again, just tell us like your podcast name and where we can find you.
Sure. Again, my name's Chris Johnson. I own a skateboard shop. That is like my main thing, although this is kind of becoming my main thing, it seems.
I think so, yeah.
That's Passion Board Shop is my store. You can find me on Instagram at Passion Board Shop. The podcast, like I said, it's not skateboarding related. I've had skateboarding on the show, but it isn't a skateboarding show. You can listen to it if you're 50, if you're 16, if you're an artist, if you're working a corporate job, whatever. Instagram is at passion_pod. You can also find the website, passionpod.org. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Apple, Acast, Google Cast, like kind of anywhere, really. And if you just search Passion Pod, not Passion Podcast, just Passion Pod, I know it's a comment, you'll see the logo is a little skull with a brain, and it says passion in like the brains of the skull, because the point is having passion as your fourth, you know what I mean? So that's where you find us everywhere. Go like, subscribe, and do all that whole thing that everyone says. But just give it a listen. If you like it, share with your friends. If you hate it, send me a DM on Instagram and tell me why, and maybe I can make it better.
It's super good, and it's super easy to find. It really is. Like when you know that you're looking for that little passion in the brain skull, it is just right there. You can't miss it. Y'all, I really hope that you have enjoyed this episode. I have loved having Chris on here to talk to us about passion. Like he said, like, follow, subscribe, all of that stuff on Instagram. I am at I've Been Thinking Pod. I'm also on Twitter. I'm still not good at that. And then you can find the blog post about today's episode, where I'm going to include the link to that book that Chris suggested as a resource, and also just like some notes from today's episode. That's I've Been Thinking pod.com. And remember, like I said, subscribe, review, rate, all that stuff on Apple Podcast if you can. And yeah, Chris, thank you. This has been an awesome episode. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Just remember, everybody, that your life is literally your own. Nobody else hates it. If you're not happy with it, it's your fault. If you are happy with it, it's because you made yourself happy with it. You're in complete control, so take advantage of that.
Snaps to that, brother. I love it. All right, thanks y'all for listening, and I will talk at you next week.
Hello, you sentient ball of stardust. My name is Casey Davis. I'm a therapist, and I'm an author of the book How to Keep House While Drowning, where I talk about ways to make it a little bit easier to take care of yourself when you're overwhelmed, stressed, have mental health issues, physical health issues, or maybe you're just in a hard season of life. Maybe you're looking for a place that you can come and listen to some practical advice. This is a podcast for all of the self-help rejects. We're going to talk about skills for survival and self-kindness. And I'm going to leave the pop psychology at the door. I promise not to tell you to meditate or to journal. We're just going to give you some really insightful conversations with hopefully some practical advice. So I don't believe you need to pick yourself up by the bootstraps. I don't want you to just try harder, and I don't believe that laziness exists. So join me over on Struggle Care, where we can find compassionate solutions that help us function a little bit better.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.